Hi, good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody in person, everybody online. Welcome to the study meeting. Today we're going to be talking about the topic of how to follow the Master, Master with capital M, of course, referring to Jesus. And I wanted us to visualize or picture a brick road. In this road, and when I say follow, let's connect that with the idea of following Jesus through this brick road. This road that is made of individual pieces of brick that we lay them out one by one as we're following along and as we're trying to follow the path, the road towards Jesus. And I'm going to be showing you guys a little bit of the bricks. What are those bricks that we can utilize to build our road to follow the Master? In the Spirit's book, we have the question 6 to 5. What is the most perfect type that God has offered to man as his guide and model? And their answer is, hold on. Oh, sorry. Second. Their answer is, now we're going to go, Jesus. That's it. It's one word. They say Jesus is the type of the moral perfection to which man may attain upon this earth. This is like a post answer, So they said Jesus, and then there's this explanation about how God offers him to our thoughts, as our most perfect model of the doctrine taught by him. And he's the purest expression of the divine law. So if we have somebody to follow, if we want to have a guide, that guide is Jesus, the Master. But what are the challenges then associated with following the Master's footsteps? Why did so many people throughout thousands of years now have tried to follow Jesus and stumbled, failed, didn't prevail? What are some of those challenges? And if we want to follow Jesus, what are some of the challenges that we face? What are some of the things that he said, that he tried to teach us, that we're still trying to grasp, we still are trying to learn? How many people have, especially in the time that he walked this earth so long ago, tried to follow him, but for some reason or another, they couldn't. They had the time, they often had the means, they had the intention of embracing the good news with capital G and capital N, but they couldn't, and they didn't for some reason. Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult? And do we have the necessary courage then to follow Jesus? And I put the word courage there because if we think of back when the time, when the Bible was written, when the apostles roamed the earth and Jesus was here, it took a lot of courage for them to be able to forfeit a lot of the traditions of their times. A lot of the things that they had to give up in order to embrace all of that Jesus was trying to teach them and show them. It took a lot of courage. Nowadays, we're here talking about Christianism, and we're not afraid that some guards are going to come and arrest us. We're not afraid to be thrown in the pit, in the arena, to be eaten by lions. I dare say it took so much more courage back then to follow the Master than it takes now. But still today, it takes courage because it's the courage to fight against our own selves. And if Jesus showed up, this is a question I put here first to think. Would we follow him? If he came here today and said the same things he said back then, give everything you have to the poor, come with me. If do this, do that, forgive unconditionally, would we follow him? Would we follow somebody that was coming with these new ideas? Back then were new ideas in a very different way, in a very different light. Would we follow him? That's something I want each of you guys to think about to yourselves. Emmanuel in the book Living Spring, message number 48, he says, Christ's language has always seemed incomprehensible and strange to many learners of the gospel. doing as much good as possible, even when evils are numerous and on the increase, lending without expecting repayment, forgiving always, loving one's enemies, and helping slanderers and other bad people. That sounds incomprehensible. That goes against the common knowledge of people must pay for what they do to you, you must retribute, you shouldn't forgive that easily, all of those things that were expected, still in our society, 2,000 years later, basically, we're still trying to grasp those aspects. We're still trying to get those bricks to put on our road. And of course, it's always seemed so strange to them, especially back then. Many people, Emmanuel's going to say, listen to the good news, but they cannot grasp its teachings. And this is something that Spiritism helps us tremendously, in my opinion, to grasp its teachings of the gospel. This happens to so many followers of the gospel because they use their mental energy in other areas. They vaguely believe in heaven's help in times of suffering, but show a complete lack of interest in studying and applying the divine laws. In studying and applying the divine laws. We are very good at asking for things when we think we need them, but how are we applying the law? How are we applying the teachings in our lives daily? And that's something that Emmanuel is saying, that many people listen to the good news, but have trouble grasping its teaching. And the teachings, when we grasp them, is not only something that's theoretical, it's something that's very practical. It's putting into practice what we're trying to understand. There's going to be a few different books that I'm going to bring here. Most of them we unfortunately don't have in English. But as I'm reading some of these books, especially by Humberto de Campos, psychographed by Chico Xavier, and Amelia Rodriguez, psychographed by Divaldo, I kept stumbling at least, on these chapters where people come and this is where the idea for this talk came from. People kept coming to Jesus. They kept coming to the apostles, and they said, I want to follow you, Master. I want to follow you, great teacher. But the end of the chapter is always the same. They end up not following Jesus. They end up not becoming an apostle themselves. They end up not applying what Jesus was actually teaching. They start with, in good faith. They start with the wanting, but there's always something that Jesus says that they need to do, or they need to renounce, or they need to do this, and then in the end they don't. So this is what led me to come up with this talk and sort of compile these different stories in a way that we can learn from them, that we can learn from those stories and see if we can apply that to our own lives. So the first one is from this book, and and Humberto is going to tell us, Humberto de Campos, the author, is going to tell us that Andrew one time returned home, with 3 companions that wanted to follow the Master. So he came home with these three Jewish men that wanted to follow Jesus. They heard about Jesus, then they met Andrew. They said, Andrew, take us to him. We wanna follow him. So the first one, and Andrew starts to introduce them. He says, Master, I brought here some very interesting men that want to follow. And the one is this one called Jacob. Jacob here, he has wonderful visions of the occult. He has seen demons themselves scourging unclean men when he visited Jerusalem. He also saw these flames. So he had the gift of seeing the invisible world, or things that would happen in the invisible world. And he also saw some of the glorious ancestors in the temple surrounding the living. So Andrew was very, excited. And then Jacob comes and says, yes, it's true, I'm a seer of what's secret. And I want to receive the lessons from the new school, Jacob is telling Jesus. But I fear public opinion. Because you see, I work at the house of this very important Roman person. And I receive a very rewarding salary. And I know that if I were to follow you and people would know, then I would lose that salary and my family would suffer. So I want to do it, but I don't want it to become public that I'm supporting you. And Jesus just nods. And then Andrew takes that silence as a means to, like, let me introduce the second one. This is Menahem. Menahem, he has ears very different from ours. He hears voices from heaven, announcing the future with precision. And in his sleep, he receives frightening warnings. He already discovered some lost treasure from a Roman person that nobody knew, because he had this dream about it, where it was, and they found it there. He also read a papyrus that contained language that he didn't speak. And Menahem says, yeah, it's true. I can do all those things. I really hear voices from heaven and solve these mysteries, and all of that. But my father-in-law, Ephraim, he's very rich, and he's a powerful perfume merchant. He's about to pass away to rest upon, with our other ancestors. And he's going to grant me this great fortune. And I know that if he finds out that I'm following you, that I'm trying to grasp those teachings, there's going to be scandal, and I'm not going to be able to have the inheritance. And I cannot lose that, So maybe if I can help you, but in secret, that would work. And then Jesus, once again, with a smile, just nods. And then Andrew comes and introduces the third, Moab. Says, Moab is a prodigy of the scriptures. All the scribes look at him with envy and spite, because he has the gift of writing with incredible ease. He writes in foreign languages and everything. And then that he doesn't even speak. And then Moab says, it's true. I don't know what happens. And he says that a light similar to fire descends from the firmament onto my hands, and I feel huge scrolls with instructions and descriptions that not even I can understand. So he says, look at the exceptional writing he's talking about. He's basically psychographing things. And Andrew was very excited, because he had all these three people with these very incredible powers that he's trying to bring to Jesus' side. But then Moab says, but here's the thing. I am linked to a great revolutionary who promised me a very important seat once he takes over, once we kill some Roman person and we take over power in this specific city. And I know that, I'm going to achieve this position, gold, fame, and all of that. But I cannot accept extensive duties. So they can know that I'm following you. It's okay, but I cannot help that much. I'll help a little with the apostles and with Jesus. And then Jesus just keeps quiet, and his silence. Andrew becomes a bit bothered by his silence. He said, Master, aren't you looking for people to help with the service? To help us build this new kingdom you talk about. And then Jesus says, no, Andrew. Let our brothers follow their road in peace. Because Andrew asked them, are you going to take them in? No. For now, their roadmap is different from ours. The first is stuck in a profitable situation. The second awaits inheritance in gold, silver, and stones. And the third remains hunting for the ephemeral glory of human power. And then Andrew says, Lord, but we must remember that one of them sees, the other hears, the last one rides. So he's pleading the case for the people. Like, these are incredible talents that we can use. Jesus says, yes, in the world that have always been prodigy men, bearers of wonderful gifts that they inadvertently spoil, but above them I'm looking for those who wish to work in the execution of our Father's will. Look how profound that is. And then what happens? They left. They couldn't give up on the things they held so dearly in their futures, and they left. There's another chapter. This one is by the writer Amelia Rodriguez, psychographed by Divaldo, where Jesus was preaching to the crowd. And as he finished, this young person comes to him. And he says, I've just listened to your preachings and your words. They penetrate me like a sharp dagger. That's what the author says. The concepts, they burn in my mind. I'm young. He says, I'm young. I respect the commandments. However, I long for pleasure, for enjoyment, because my vibrant flesh craves that. And I have power, I have time, I have money, I have influence. And is happiness possible without pleasure? Is the happiness you're talking about possible without pleasure? And then Jesus says the happiness that is based on pleasure collapses, Jesus tells him. All immediate pleasure is fleeting, meaning all of the things that we take for, pleasurable things that are material, they are fleeting. The happiness that comes from them is fleeting. And Jesus is telling that to that young man. Then he says, but the young man he wasn't convinced. So he said, but how can we not aspire to love, if love rewards the person that loves with pleasure? Because he says, I want to love. How can I not love then? And he says, Jesus says, you're referring to the wild possession that is confused with the burning joy, not the love that is shared in spirit. And he says, the man says, however, I love, but I still suffer. The one you're saying I love, but I still suffer. And then Jesus says, true love does not produce suffering, because it knows how to wait. It never rushes or destroys. It is all about building good for the general good. If you wish to love so that happiness becomes a real state for you, renounce numbing pleasures today and sow good for tomorrow. Love will come after you, while the time will ease the anxiety in your heart, calming you down. Do not fan the flame of desire in your soul with sparks of illusion in your body. So do not give in to those more material tendencies, those more, inferior instincts that we still have, that we still harbor. And he's saying, do not mix love with pleasure, or the idea of those, because true love does not bring suffering. How incredible is that? And the young man said, I understand you, Lord, but it is too difficult. It is too difficult for me, and he left. So he also could not grasp the teachings. He also could not follow the Master. Although he came in with such eagerness, he also could not follow the Master, because he could not differentiate between what's love with the Spirit and the love that he thought was love, that would derive all those earthly pleasures. The next one is by Humberto de Campos again. And this one is called Blessed Golds. The actual name of the chapter is Blessed Golds. Gold is that, Emmanuel also likes this word a lot. The little prod that we use with the cattle, that the cattle doesn't want to go, like you want to prod them, so like a little poking stick. So blessed golds. What are these poking sticks? Let's see. One time they were all gathered and Jesus was doing some of his miracles, was healing the sick and helping people. And after some time, Peter came to him and he said, sir, your statements are always images of the truth. I understand that the teachings of the good news will spread happiness throughout the earth. So Peter was saying, everything you're saying, everything you're doing is good. However, don't you agree that illnesses are terrible scourges for the creature? What if we cured all diseases? If we provided lasting relief to those suffering bodily afflictions? Do you not believe that in this way we would establish safer foundations for the kingdom of God? And Philip even jumps in. It is not easy when physical suffering bothers us. It is almost impossible to meditate on the problems of the soul if the flesh remains afflicted with ailments. Isn't that true? How hard it is for us to focus on anything when the flesh is sick, when we are in pain, physical pain. So they were saying, it's hard, like the kingdom of the God is great, but it's hard to focus on the issues of the soul when the material body is suffering so much. Jesus allowed, some serenity to reign according to the author, and then he said, tomorrow, instead of preaching, because he always used to preach and then he would heal some people, or some people would say would be healed, not even changing the subject there. And what would happen is, he said, next time I'm not going to do the preaching, I'm just going to, people come, I'll just heal them, and then we preach afterwards. Jesus said that. Okay, tomorrow this is what we're going to do. So in the course of a few hours, more than 100 prisoners were freed from their earthly ailments. Jesus didn't preach, he came and he healed, more than 100 people with, rheumatism, they said, blindness, obsessions, all problems that we can imagine. He healed them all. And as soon as they reappeared, this is interesting, with shining eyes, restored joy, tranquility, and movement, Peter formulated the fraternal invitation to the banquet of truth and light. So after they were healed, Peter, now you guys are healed, let me tell you a little bit about the word of God, Let me tell you a little bit about this. Most of them, actually all of them, quickly left between hurried sentences of thanks and apology. Some said they were eagerly awaiting this kingdom they kept talking about, that they heard that Jesus was preaching, but they had stuff to do. I have to go. Thank you, and really thank you for healing me, but I have to go. And then when everybody had left on that day, there was only the 12 and Jesus. And then they were a bit embarrassed. It says an unpleasant silence fell over the reduced assembly. And then Peter had this look of sadness on him, disappointment, but Jesus spoke compassionately. Peter, study the experience and keep the lesson. Let us alleviate pain, but let us not forget that suffering is man's own creation, helping him for the higher life. The sick flesh is medicine for the poisoned spirit. Without the blessed sting of bodily infirmity, it is almost impossible to guide the human herd from the quagmire of earth to the heights of paradise. So Jesus was basically showing how the sickness, how the problems of the flesh are part of the journey. They are part of what's important for us to look at the spirits, because they had the same idea that a lot of us can have, which is it's so hard to focus on these things. It's so hard to read a book, to study spiritism when I'm suffering from a bad leg, when I have the pain in my neck, when I have all of this. Saying right here is the man's own creation. The suffering, in a way, is this blessed gold. And that's why the chapter is called the blessed golds. So to follow the master in this situation, we can take from this is to avoid transforming pain into suffering, and then understand that these pains are blessed golds in our own path to the true elevation. Now, chapter 20 on this one, we have also 3 employees, another three men that were coming from the Jerusalem temple. So they went to Jesus in the house of Simon Peter, and they were saying, Messiah, we're ecstatic with your teachings that we heard that people are saying everywhere, that you're saying this. We're really, excited and ecstatic with them, but we wanted to consult with you. We want to follow you, but we want to consult with you since we work for the temple in Jerusalem. They said, we have a lot of enemies there. So we want to know what you think we should do with these people that there are enemies there. And then Jesus says, firstly we need to consider our adversaries as instructors. Because the enemy, he says, the enemy sees the shadow in us that the friend refuses to see. And with that shadow, we can then work on illuminating our light in that shadow. That's what it says here in this chapter. Just like iron, he makes an analogy. Just like iron, which after patiently suffering the heat of the forge, still endures the blows of the mallet with humble dignity in order to adapt to the utility and beauty that it was created. And then they seem to understand, but they're like, okay. And then they started to ask these quick questions, one by one. Said, sir, but what if we're insulted? What if we're insulted by these enemies? Then Jesus says, forgive and silence. Forgiveness and silence. What if we're persecuted? The other one asked. Let us use prayer, Jesus says, in favor of those who afflict us. But Master, what if they hit us? What if they punch us, physically, attack us? He says, our intimate peace must be our asylum, and brotherly love our attitude. What response should we offer them if they persist, to slander and perversity? And he says, forgiveness is the only response they deserve, because they are very unhappy themselves. But what reaction, the last one says, what reaction should you take toward those who persecute you? And then Jesus says, spiritual help is the best medicine for those who torment us. He even goes on to say, those who, like if you strike somebody with a sword, you're going to be stricken back with the same sword or something like that, until love truly prevails. What happened was, Jesus then finished by saying, it is imperative that we know how to love and educate our fellow human beings with the strength of our convictions and knowledge, so that the kingdom of God may spread throughout the world. The good news of salvation expects the saint to support the sinner, for the healthy to help the sick, for the victim to help the executioner. For this, it is essential that unconditional forgiveness, with the forgetting of all offenses, ensures the peace and the renewal of everything. So this was the lesson that Jesus tried to teach those who wanted to follow him, even from a distance, those who wanted guidance from him. And in that moment that he said that, he finished saying that, it says that a child cried in the room next to them. And Jesus went there to help this child that was crying uncontrollably. And when he came back to talk to the three men, the room was empty. They had left. Another example of those who could not follow the Master. And then in this book, Preludes to the Divine Kingdom by Amelia Rodriguez now, we have the chapter 4 where it's the talk with Nicodemus. And it's interesting because she's very poetic. I love the way she writes. And she's talking about how Nicodemus wanted to meet with Jesus. He was, a secret admirer, let's say, of Jesus. And we have that nice conversation. He comes almost like in the middle of the night, a bit, not raising too much awareness, but he comes to talk to Jesus. But when he gets there, Amelia says that it's like Nicodemus heard in his heart, like this, that Jesus was saying, I have known you, Nicodemus, bar Nicodemus, since long before. Like, of course, Jesus, as the great shepherd, knows all his sheep. But so he knew Nicodemus. He knew what Nicodemus wanted. And then Nicodemus starts the conversation with him, and at some point, he says, he asks Jesus, like, what must be done to enjoy, the peace with the right mind and the good heart, so I can partake in the delights of the kingdom, in the blessings of the kingdom, with capital K, that you talk about. What can I do? What must be done? And Amelia says that this question has been burning inside Nicodemus for such a long time. She says he wanted the roadmap, he wanted the script, but feared finding it. He would like to know the truth, but was afraid to know it. But in that moment he asked. He had the courage to ask. The truth, she says, the author, had been the reason for his unceasing search. But at the same time he was aware that to know it would be to die to all illusions, to bear the oppressing burden of incomprehension from others, and struggles with a firm spirit after this knowledge. He waited for the response, after which he would start to live, dying to everything he had amassed so far in life. So here we're seeing again, to follow the teachings, to follow the Master, we must not be afraid to know the truth, to know what we must do. Same thing with him. He wanted that, but he was afraid of what he would get, because to follow the Master means to die to all of that, all of the illusions that we have, all of the ephemeral things that we search, that we seek, that we try to get, try to buy, try to achieve, try to obtain, is to die to all of those things when we follow the Master. Moreover, when we're talking about faith, there is that amazing passage of that we see, especially in the Bible, when Jesus, after healing a bunch of people, he said he wanted to pray in the top of the mount, and he said to the disciples, you guys can go ahead and go on the boat, and I'll come and join you later. Later that night, he was alone, and the boat was already at a considerable distance from the shore in that lake. And when he wanted to go with the disciples, what he did was he walked in the water right before the dawn. But when they saw a person walking on the water that late in the night, they all cried, it's a ghost. It's an apparition. They were all afraid. And then Jesus says, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. And then Peter replied, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Here, I bolded, Lord, if it's you. Because, honestly, who else could it be going on the lake like that? Number one. So, it's interesting to see the lack of faith. Because Jesus already said, it is I. And Peter was saying, prove to me if it's you. Tell me that I'll go with you. He was lacking the faith in that moment to trust that that one was in fact Jesus that was telling them, it's me, it's okay. Because also the winds were shaking the boat. It was not like a crystal clear, calm lake. And then he says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. And then Jesus says, come. And this is interesting, because now his faith sort of changed, because Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. So he actually walked on the water, going towards Jesus, had the faith to put his foot in the water, and then put the other foot and try to walk. So he had the faith there. But then, what happened? But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out. It's interesting, because in this passage, it says that he was afraid and began to sink. Let's think of the order of things here. It wasn't he was starting to drown and became afraid and cried for help. He was afraid. So what happened? His faith wavered in that moment because of the wind. And if we can do an analogy here, let's think of, the winds that buffet against us sometimes in life, the difficulties, and how much our faith wavers in those times. Even if we start out with faith, it wavers, just like it did there. And then he says, Lord, save me. And then Jesus says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Jesus saves him. But he says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? He doesn't say you of no faith. He says of little faith. Because there was some faith there, but he doubted. Moving on, we have this passage in Matthew 19 that said that a man came up to Jesus and asked, Teacher, what good things must I do to get eternal life? And he says, what do you ask me about what is good? There is only one who is good, If you want to enter life, keep the commandments. Which ones? You shall not murder, shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony. Honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself. All these I have kept, the young man said. What do I still lack? And this is in Matthew 19, but this is also in Luke 18. So this is an interesting passage that we probably have heard, in the circles of Christianism before. What do I still lack? If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. But when the young man, it says here, when the young man heard that, he went away sad because he had such great wealth. Another example of Jesus extending the hand, telling what needs to be done to build that brick road to follow him, but then another person failed to do so. In that moment, we don't know what happened with the Spirit over the past 2,000 years. But in that moment, he failed to follow him. He did not want to let go. And then we have this passage that I love. There, I have a talk only with this. Maybe we'll give it next year. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. So this passage here of Jesus saying that, because this is something that he said more than once, appears 3 times in 3 Gospels. 1 in Mark, 2 in Matthew, and 1 in Luke. The same idea. The reason I put the Luke one is because I like it the most. Because it's the only one that says, take up their cross daily. The word daily. Because every other one is take up their cross and follow me. Or deny themselves, take the cross and follow me. So Jesus is giving us what we need to do in order to follow him. He's saying deny yourself, meaning what? Deny, fight against, and learn from and overcome those barriers that are, he knows us. Our weaknesses, our lower tendencies. Deny yourselves, meaning accept me, accept God, accept that which is eternal, not that which is material and ephemeral. Deny ourselves. This is one interpretation. Take up their cross and daily. And look, we have daily, the word daily. Because it is. We all have crosses that we bear. We all have crosses that we have to carry daily. Some of these are very large, very heavy. Most of these we have chosen before coming on earth again. Those were incarnated, the discarnated the same. We choose those crosses. So he says, deny yourselves, meaning fight against those lower instincts. Accept the challenges that you must face. Accept your own cross. He's not saying take up your neighbor's cross, which is very possible, right? Charity. He's saying take up their crosses. So your cross, take up your cross. And then come and follow me. So to follow me is exactly what we're talking about. How to follow the Master. Denying yourselves, this is one formula here. Denying ourselves and taking up our crosses daily. Another lesson for us. And then we have the passage of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Because when people arrived home back then, they used to wash their feet because they often walked either barefoot or with sandals, so the feet were very dirty. But it's usually the custom was for the lowest ranking person of the household to wash the feet of the other ones that are above them. But what happened was, usually it was slaves or women also. That's something that in that society, in that moment, was the custom. Nobody wanted to wash people's feet. But then we have this passage in John 13 that Simon Peter said, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Says, you do not realize, Jesus says, you do not realize what I am doing, but later you will understand. No, Peter said, no. You shall never wash my feet. And Jesus says, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Then Lord, Peter says, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. And then they continue. And once Jesus says, do you understand? Once he's finished, do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, Jesus says, for that is what I am. Now that I, he says, your Lord and your teacher have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. And it's interesting because he says to Peter, you don't understand now, but you will understand at some point what I'm doing right now. The lesson of humility that Jesus was showing, of lowering himself physically and washing a dirty part of someone else at feet. That was considered a job for slave or women. And he was doing that. And he's saying, unless I do that, unless you let me do that, you have no part with me. Meaning, if you want to learn, here it is. Here's the example. You say I'm your Lord and your teacher. You put me above so many things. Do to each other what I have done for you as well. And then, in this other passage, yet I told you it's a compilation of different passages to learn different things. There's this is in the book by Emilia Rodriguez, When the Spring Returns, or something like that. I forgot the title, but it's by Emilia Rodriguez, and this is chapter 3. It's a starry night sky. Peter is sitting in the margin of the lake, and Jesus comes to him, and Jesus notices that Peter is very sad, like he's looking very hopeless. And then he starts to ask Peter, like, what's going on? And then Peter says, I'm aware of my own inferiority, And I know that your love called me to the good news so that I could be renewed towards the light and could grow towards the love of our Father. Peter is saying, like, I'm blessed, and I truly embrace everything you've done and you've shared and you've taught me. He says, but it's sometimes, he says, it's very hard for me to understand and to apply some of the things you're teaching, Lord. And I wanna ask, like, how can we tolerate the aggression that hurts us, when it promises to help? And then Jesus says, keeping the peace in the heart. However, how can we maintain peace when we are besieged by the hypocrisy of some, by the pertinacious suspicion of others, under the severe gaze of people who are in a worse situation than ourselves? And he says, maintaining mildness in judgment. And then Peter continues, I agree that gentleness is an effective medicine. But wouldn't we expect that our companions, fond of the new light, would also exercise it in return? He's saying, wouldn't we expect that the companions, fond of the new light, meaning the apostles themselves and those disciples and those who were following the Master, wouldn't we expect them to exercise this mildness or this gentleness that you're talking about? And he says, Jesus says, it's necessary to understand them all and love them without demanding that they be better or worse. So love without, boundaries, love and understand them despite of what they're doing. And then Peter says, but given the impossibility of truly doing what you're saying and tolerating them, wouldn't it be better to just ignore them or distance ourselves from them? Then Jesus says, loving the good ones is reciprocation, but serving and loving those who despise us and doubt us is charity for them and happiness for ourselves. Meaning, it's very easy to love those who agree with us, those who love us back, those who do good things to us. Even those fond of the new light, meaning those of the same religious belief, those that follow the same religious path. But that's reciprocation, he's saying. That's just you giving back what has been given to you. But loving those who despise us and doubt us is charity for them and happiness for us. This is another thing we must think about when we're talking about the bricks for the road. And then the book, Christ's Example. This is book Living Spring. The message is Christ's Example, the name of the message, 109. Emmanuel's going to say, the divine friend knows what is in us. He knows the dark and heavy burden of our past, the difficulties of our present, full of hesitations and wrongs. Nevertheless, he lovingly holds out his hands to us. He knows us. He knows us. And Emmanuel so poetically in this message says, and I dare not paraphrase this, so I'm going to read this one. He says, he knew that usury lived with Zacchaeus, but he led him from miserliness to generosity. He knew that Mary Magdalene was possessed by evil spirits, but he renewed her for pure love. He recognized the intellectual vanity of Nicodemus, but he gave him new concepts about the grandeur and magnificence of life. He identified the weakness of Simon Peter, but little by little he installed in the disciples' heart a spiritual strength that would make him the pillar of the newly born Christianity. He saw the doubts of Thomas, but never forsook him. He knew the darkness that dwelled in Judas, but he did not deny him his affection. Above all, Jesus was concerned with providing each soul a broader vision of life and in allotting to each spirit effective resources for renewal for the good. So his example, of course, is the best road we can follow, is the best way we can try to follow the Master, because he knows us. He knows us deeply. But do we know him? Do we really have the courage to follow him? So the road to the Master, how to follow the Master, I said it's built of bricks, one by one, that we laid out with every single opportunity that we have to, and that we got from these lessons. And I put just a few of them here a few of the bricks that we learn from these messages that will lead us in this road to follow our Master, Jesus Christ. Have a blessed week.
Thank you.